Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into this week's edition of Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. And it's time to talk predictions for our new year on the 2022 financial horizon. Phil and I are going to get into what they're saying, not necessarily what we're saying. Yep. We're going to get into what's being said by the talking heads, which I guess technically we are, Phil. Are we talking heads?
Kind of talking heads, I guess. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Just a different version of talking heads.
That's right. You doing all right?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Yeah. Doing pretty good. We are into our second week of the new year. So
settle into the new year.
So far, nothing too crazy going on, at least personally anyway. People love to make predictions, right? We all like to do it. Who's going to be in the Super Bowl? Who's going to win the World Series? So on and so forth. And we do this stuff financially. So I got a list of some stuff here from some of these financial prognosticators. I was afraid I was not going to get that word out.
Prognosticator. That's a big word. That'd be a big Scrabble word.
You like that? Yeah, that's very good. So let's go agree or disagree and just give us, kind of your own analysis. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, right? You've been a CPA and a financial specialist for many, many years. You've seen a lot of stuff. You've helped a lot of people. You've seen a lot of things, how they affect scenarios in different ways. And a lot of times I feel like these talking heads, even if they've got a pedigree, it's like they've stepped away, especially if they've been doing it for a long time. Like some of these bigger names, they've stepped away from the hands-on helping people kind of thing many years ago. Right. And so while they may know their stuff, it may have lost like the true impact of how it affects a person's life.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah. And how all the pieces really fit together, and I mean, that whole dynamic has changed in the world we live in today. So,
sure. I mean, if you were an active financial professional, like let's say one of these big talking heads on, CNN or something 15 years ago, actually helping somebody today is a totally different animal.
Totally different animal. Yeah, totally different.
If you're not hands-on in the game, it's not the same, right? Yep. So anyway. So let's go through some of this stuff. We got Beth Ann Bavino. Hopefully I'm saying that right. She's the Global Chief U.S. Economist, S&P Global Chief U.S. Economist, and she's talking about the GDP. So she said we have a growth forecast for 2022 of 3.9%. So we still don't see a recession on the horizon is what she's claiming. Now, in a minute, we're going to get to the inflation stat.
Right.
And tell me. And I think for a lot of us laymen, right, we're like, wait a minute, these two numbers, how do you not see recession when these two numbers don't quite jive? But anyway, 3.9 on the GDP. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. There's too many outside influences and unknowns yet. I mean, and the thing that always cracks me up with all of this is even like a recession, they don't tell you we were in a recession until it's long gone.
Right.
And then it's like, oh yeah, we started the recession like 8 months ago.
Yeah, they tell you.
In the middle of it. It's like, okay, well.
Officially.
Officially, we're in the
already
recession.
Know it.
Oh, we've been here for 8 months.
We're out here buying
we've
milk
been living it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, my concern with this is, there's still, number one, a lot of outside influences have been playing into the economic growth we've seen. A lot of free money, stimulus money, money, PPP loans, all this money to businesses to help sustain and continue through the pandemic. At some point that has to end. The government can't just keep printing and giving this money out. So when that extra cash flow, let's hope they don't, at least, because the more they do, the less our value of our dollar becomes. But, as that starts to get pulled back and the economy has to kind of live on its own, so to speak, we'll start to see a reality of what this looks like. And the other side of it is the whole supply chain and the issues that are there still. There's a lot of that has to get resolved for the economy to be able to grow, even if the money's there. So I don't know. So I'm holding out on that. I think that's a high estimate of what it would be.
I was going to say, that was going to be my question. Do you think that's a high or a low number?
I think that's going to be high.
Just under 4%. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're going to be at kind of I don't want to say a recession yet, but I think I'd be more likely to see it kind of sideways, bouncing around, not really a whole lot of growth.
It's hard not to feel it coming, right? For many people, they're going to say, hey, we're already in it because it's killing me to go to the grocery store.
Oh yeah.
It's, we're going to get there. We're going to get to inflation.
Yep.
All right, so that was the GDP. So let's go to the housing market. And Mr. Paul Nag, maybe KNAG of ratezip.com. This is very wordy, Phil. See if you can break this.
I know a lot of words in this.
This is very wordy. See if you can break this down. He says, I believe that a hawkish Fed combined with Omicron, however you say that, I can never get it right, uncertainty could bring higher interest rates amid domestic hardship, cooling off home values and putting pressure on stock and crypto markets in 2022. Sounds like a fancy way of saying he thinks the housing market's going to cool down.
Right. And I think we're already starting to see some of that. I mean, part of it is just a natural time frame we're in. I mean, you get to the winter, the holiday season. I mean, the housing market typically slows at this time anyways. People are busy doing other things. They don't want to move. They don't want to deal with it. Our neck of the woods, they don't want to deal with moving in the middle of winter.
Right.
And
that's probably more of it, because I just saw, I don't remember who the person was, but I literally just saw last night prior to us taping the show, them talking about they feel like the housing economy is going to stay hot once we get to spring.
Yeah. So we'll have to see kind of what spring leads to. Yeah. A lot of it is going to be interest rate driven though. That is one of the major factors that's led to the hot market that we've had and the substantial increases in prices is that people don't look at prices. They look at what's it costing me on a monthly basis, what's in my budget, so to speak.
Right.
And as that interest rate is low, the price can go up to help support that same monthly payment, so we're going to see as interest rates start to rise, that's going to naturally drive prices down or at least be a resistance to it.
Adversely, you could kind of look at this and say, well, if the interest rate's really low and I can afford, to your point, it's in my budget to pay this monthly mortgage because I can get this amount of money for this house, you kind of go and get it, but then you wind up being house poor because now you're being affected by the inflation, which we're getting to next. You've bought the house, but it's killing you because it's propane, maybe, right? Or whatever to heat it. Or electricity costs.
Or it's bigger and you're looking at your budget from a utility cost, taxes, all the other things based on that lower.
Yeah. We're looking at it from I can swing this mortgage. So I've got this great house now, but I can't afford to heat it.
All the other
groceries
aspects that relate to that house, because it's not just the house cost. I mean, what that monthly payment is, the principal and interest.
Let's go to inflation here. Luke Zhang, a financial expert at MBA. He says, I don't see inflation ending anytime soon. Kind of interesting based on the global.
With the Feds. Yeah.
I don't see an inflation ending anytime soon. With the lack of workers and the shortage of supplies, it's clear that inflation will continue to be an issue into 2022. I definitely agree with that. Inflation stat to base this on. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research predicts inflation will fall from 5.1, which is already low.
Where did they get that? Yeah, I've not heard that one yet.
From 5.1 down to 2.3 by the fourth quarter of 22. Well, where we're sitting right now, Phil, that's like 9 months away. So
there's a lot of numbers that fall in place to make that happen, I would think.
Okay, so let's break this down real quick. First of all, do you agree with 5.1?
I think that's low. Again, to your point earlier, I mean, I've heard in the upper fives, even approaching 6, and the problem with that number even is they're not including housing and some of these other aspects that, why not? I mean, that's the reality for the vast majority of people. So why aren't we counting that in inflation?
And most people don't realize that, Phil, right? So if you're not listening to some financial talk shows or whatever the case is, you may not realize, you just see the headline news, inflation is at 5.1%, let's say, with this, based on this thing, but it's not. It's higher because they're not including some major things that we all use.
Yeah. I don't know why.
They don't tell you.
Decided that was excluded. So
housing, really. It's like really fuel, So
yeah, exactly.
Very interesting stuff. So another stat here. So inflation causes. This is Dr. Tenpao Lee. I hope I'm saying that right. He says we will have significant inflation in the first half of 2022 until the supply chain issues are resolved and the global economic infrastructure is restored. I definitely think that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
And I don't know, Phil, like anything, we've all kind of seen, if a company of any size typically gets the opportunity to raise their prices, it's really hard for them to accept pushing them back down.
I mean, the automotive industry, we've seen huge inflation in prices. You really think that once all the supply chain thing gets fixed, you're going to see a decrease in price? No.
I just saw a 2022 brand new truck I was looking at. Probably not going to do it because I just don't know if I trust anything made in the last year as well.
That's right. Oh, we don't need to put that in. We can't get that part.
Well, I was taking mine in because I got to get new tires and stuff put on it. And when you're waiting, you kind of just walk around and look, right? So looking, and it was like $60,000 for the same exact truck that I bought 4 years ago. And I think I bought it 4 years ago. It was like 40 something.
I know.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so we'll wait and see on the inflation. To my point earlier, I was saying there's a lot of things that need to be fixed for this to even come close to being true. Supply chain is a huge one. I mean, how long have they been telling us, oh yeah, we've got this figured out. It's going to be fixed. It's going to, well, hey, we're still here. They still don't have it.
We're still having chip shortages and things, which is why some of the car issues that we're just talking about. I mean, I heard a chip shortage conversation early 21. And here we are a year later, basically, and we're still having chip shortages. Phil, to tie that in, Mike Parra, CEO of global logistics company Deutsche Post DHL Group, that's a mouthful. He's talking about the Great Resignation, which was our prior podcast, as still part of a reason why we're seeing, and to this other gentleman's comment a minute ago, same thing, right? People are walking off their jobs. If you're not working, if someone's not working, we're not making this stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, just to your point, looking at a dealership. I mean, you walk in a dealership, used to be, filled with salespeople, and it was hustle and bustle, a lot of things going on. You walk in there now, it's like crickets. It's like, what? Where is everyone? But they don't have the inventory to sell. So
inventory, therefore they don't have the staff.
Crazy.
Yeah. So Mr. Parra says the number one thing keeping me up is the Great Resignation. What we're seeing is that people want to be in control of their future, understandable, but more than ever before. But because so much is changing around them, the whole future of work is up in the air, which has triggered this resignation. We're watching this space closely, but we're not being flexible enough as society, right? So we've gotten greedy. We had this conversation a little bit. You're working from home. It got good to you. You're like, hey, I'm not spending as much money driving. Gas has gone up. I'm not spending as much money on food. Have you went and bought a sandwich lately? The cost of just a sandwich is crazy. So we're not doing all this stuff. I'm working from home. I'm very happy. I'm in my jammies. Why would I give that up? And it's hurting us because now we don't have people going to jobs and building things to then sell the things. And again, this whole supply chain issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain jobs that works for, and there's others that you can't do that. Sorry, you can't build a car in your living room. And I mean, the other interesting fact of all this is I think it's started to speed up companies' move to automation and replacement of individuals in the workforce, partially because they've been forced. If you look at a lot of the fast food industry, grocery stores, any, Home Depot, any of the shopping retail, there's not as many lines open with somebody physically there, a cashier there helping you. They've converted the majority of those to self-checkouts.
It's to be careful what you ask for, right, Phil? We're putting ourselves in a real interesting position as a species, really, because we want more, but we're also forcing people's hand. Companies are companies, they're entities. They're going to do what they have to do to survive. And if that means automating your position away because you've walked away because you want to work from home in your jammies, don't be surprised when you can no longer find employment in that position.
And the whole concept of people wanting to earn more, and I get it. I understand everyone wants to earn more. That's the American dream. Want to make more money. That's great. But the reality is companies make the profit they make, and they're always going to make the profit. So if you think that you're going to earn $18, $20 an hour at fast food and it not going to affect everything else, it's going to affect everything else. And we've already started to see it. I mean, all these prices have gone up at everything you do. It's this funny cyclical piece that no one really stops and thinks all the way through to say, okay, well, I'm making more money. Oh, but everything else costs me more. So am I really in any different economic position than I was before?
That's the real pickle we find ourselves in now. You go back 2 years, let's say to 19, before all this stuff happened with the and really this is the thing, Phil, where no kind of, I shouldn't say no, but very little, it seemed to be at least being reported upon, very
Right.
little conversation into what happens when you shut down a globe.
Oh, we've never done it before. It's
And
how in the world.
this
Yeah.
is all of the stuff that is happening. Then you couple that in with a lot of the social, economic stuff going on, and the
Yep.
cries for this and that and the other. And it's all, again, understandable. But when you put all this stuff together at one time, you're basically kind of overloading a system, right? However you kind of want to look at things, whatever your political stance is. I'm not trying to be offensive or trying to rile anybody up, but if you take a step back and think about this for a second, you can't reinvent the wheel all at one time and not expect the cart to be lumpy and have problems, right? And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and that, to your point of this whole discussion of predictions, I mean, back in the day, economic predictions, and that was much more stable, and because we knew this happened, these were the correlations and how it all kind of worked together, and right. But I mean, to your point, when you start to change this piece and that, I mean, all these different factors have changed at the same time.
Yeah,
the stability that was in that economy and how these interactions work, we don't have that history to look at because we're in new territory now. Things have all changed. So it makes it very difficult to know, okay, where is this really going? You got to have a fluid plan to say, okay, well, this is the potential.
Yep.
What happens if this happens with inflation or with taxes, with all these different pieces now? Because
to that point, that simple bringing it down to just everyday life. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day whose child was very excited. They got a job, I think at Taco Bell or something, at like $10.50 an hour or something like that. And they were super stoked. Maybe it was $11.50. I can't remember exactly what it was. But in the same conversation, they were telling their parent, my friend, how upset they were at how much it cost them to fill up their car to go back and forth to work, at this new job that they got, and it's like, it's this, where they're paying $4 a gallon for the gas, and they got like they got a $3 bump from where they were at their other fast food job. I think they just went from one fast food place to another.
The other. Yep.
And so a couple, they went from like $7 an hour or whatever it used to be to like 10 something, but they're basically burning it all up in gas. And it's all the same kind of thing, right? We're seeing all this stuff. Like I just mentioned, food is higher. Just going to a place and getting a sandwich, going to Jersey Mike's or Subway or whatever. All that meat is up, right? Because we saw a lot of conversation about there was turkey shortages for Thanksgiving. So we're seeing all this kind of stuff, and so it really kind of creates this final, I guess, battleground conversation. From Tim Smart, contributing editor at U.S. News and World Report. It said, in the end, 2022 may come down to a battle between the animal spirit of the American consumer, a virus that continues to outfox the experts, and central banks that are struggling to catch up with a level of price increases they never underestimated. They never estimated properly. So it just sounds like a big mess.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many unknowns. There's a lot of factors still at play that haven't been settled. And I mean, the interesting piece that we didn't touch on with the inflation and that whole concept is who's the big winner in all of that is all the governments. I mean, think about it. Inflation, your wage goes up. What does that mean? Well, you're going to be in a higher tax bracket potentially.
Right. Which they need
more federal, more state taxes, which is okay. Yeah, they need it, but you're not keeping as much of that money. Did you factor that piece in too? So it's great to get that higher wage, but you've got to understand the big picture. How does this circle work? Right.
Right. And so it leaves us kind of wondering, what do we do? Especially if we're in our demographic, which is typically the folks that are listening to our show and interacting, is going to be that 50 plus. You do have some younger clients as well, but traditionally, so where do you find yourself? You might have been in your peak earning years. You might still be. You might be, frustrated or trying to help your children or your grandchildren. It's a lot of unknowns, and so having a good understanding of what you got and how it's going to affect things and keeping a closer eye may be more important than it's been over the last couple of years, Phil.
Yeah, really. And we talk about it all the time, almost every show. It comes down to, number one, having a plan. You've got to have a strategy laid out with some assumptions and factors in play, and then monitor back to that. Where are we at based on our assumptions? How does inflation affect us? What are we going to do to head against that? What's my investment strategy, my spending strategy? How does this all play out? So you're not walking into this blindly. Not that you can control any of it, but you can control certain aspects of your plan.
Right.
then how do you manipulate and make it work under these new circumstances we're in today? It's moving all the time, as a lot of these uncertainties come out, oh, we underestimated inflation again, and all of a sudden, oh, it doesn't like that, or all these different factors as it plays out. And we get back to some more stability and a direction. Where are we heading? Whether that's a downturn or a recession or into the recovery So, at some point things have to shift. You have to have a plan in place to factor in those ebbs and flows that are going to happen. It's just part of life.
Yep.
You can't avoid them. You've got to plan for them. So,
and predictions are predictions, but
yep.
There's certainly, data that can be extracted from that, and you can kind of get, maybe close to it. Just, of course, it's like also calling the weather.
It's
sometimes you just never really know. So having some sort of a strategy, doing some things that you can control goes a long way. And if you need help with all that, folks, you should know what to do by this point. So reach out to Phil, give him a jingle at 248-888-7530, or stop by the website, philstaxhacks.com. All the information's on the screen, or it's also in the show notes as well, philstaxhacks.com. And have a conversation for yourself. And that way you can kind of hopefully start to get that strategy in place. So whether these predictions are right or wrong, you got yourself a plan to fall back on.
Got a plan. Yep.
Phil, thanks for hanging out, buddy. I appreciate your time as always. All right, we'll talk to you next time on Phil's Tax Hacks and other retirement facts.
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.